Well, let's go back to that news we've been reporting from Slovakia. Reports in the Slovakian media are saying that Prime Minister Robert Fico has been taken to hospital after being shot. A newspaper has reported that he was leaving a government meeting in the central town of Handlova when several shots were fired from a crowd. An eyewitness said he had fallen to the ground and was then loaded into a vehicle and taken away. Those are the latest reports we've just had. And we can speak to our correspondent Paul Moss, who's joined me here in the studio. Paul, do we know any more details about what happened?
I'm afraid you have said pretty much all we know. Handlova, a small town right in the middle of Slovakia. We're told that the Prime Minister was leaving a building called the House of Culture when, as you say, shots were heard. At first, there were just reports of a shooting in Handlova, and then it turned out it was the Prime Minister. And we're told he's been taken to hospital. In terms of his condition, I'm afraid at the moment that's all we know.
And he's a long-serving politician, isn't he? He's been Prime Minister for many years.
He is the giant of Slovakian politics. He's been Prime Minister 3 times. He was. Let's remember that Slovakia is a relatively young country. It was born when Czechoslovakia split in two in 1993. And in that short time of Slovakia's existence, Robert Fico has been Prime Minister 3 times now. And each time he's been Prime Minister, I should say, it's been a rather tumultuous occupation of that office. He has constantly been dogged by all sorts of allegations. People have made allegations, I should stress not proven, that he was connected to corruption. And that indeed is what made him lose power on the second time he was in office. The allegations got worse and worse. And then at one point, a journalist who'd been investigating these allegations was assassinated along with his fiancée. That was the point when Robert Fico had to resign. A lot of people thought his political career was over then, but he came back this year.
We're just seeing some reports actually on one of the agencies saying that 4 shots were fired after this government meeting. One of them hit the Prime Minister in the abdomen. That's according to the broadcaster TA3. Obviously, more details to emerge, but it seems he's been shot at least once. Did he have obvious enemies, would you say?
Robert Fico was a man who took a very confrontational stance to an awful lot of things, and I'm sure made enemies in the process. I mean, his politics, he was considered very left-wing, then he was considered very right-wing. I think his politics are best described as populist, and that inevitably made him enemies because he spoke it as he saw it. I mean, he didn't like journalists, I should say. When journalists criticised him, he called them the corrupt gang of swines. And at one point when a journalist had written something critical about him, he said, "Should I go over there and give you guys a slap?" I'm saying that just to give you an idea of the tone of the man. But what's been particularly distinctive about his recent occupation of the office of Prime Minister, he came to power saying he did not want Slovakia to keep giving weapons to Ukraine. He's seen as close to Vladimir Putin. I should say that Slovakia until then had been a very generous contributor of arms to Ukraine for such a small country. He came to power saying that's over. He's much more keen on, he says, finding a peaceful way forward for Ukraine, which involves compromising with Russia. Also, as I said, he is long dogged with allegations that he was connected with corruption. The journalist who was shot, who was investigating him, also investigates the mafia. So in the sense that this is not a conciliatory population with friends everywhere, he was someone who, yes, probably did have enemies. They're obviously very early to be speculating about who might have done this.
No, very early. Well, just another line, actually, Paul, that the Slovak president has condemned a brutal attack on the Prime Minister and wished him a full recovery. Just to recap then, the Prime Minister of Slovakia then shot, we're hearing reports, 4 shots were fired. He was hit once in the abdomen. Just to recap, I mean, he sounds, from what you're saying, a very colourful kind of politician.
That's one word people use, yes. He's a controversial character and always set out to be. I mean, as I said, you've got to remember Slovakia, this young country, only been in existence since '93, and Czechoslovakia had only got rid of the Soviet bloc, only became truly independent in 1989. It was a space when lots of colourful people emerged, lots of characters into a world where democratic politics was relatively new and young. And a lot of reporting around this election that's just taken place, which saw Robert Fico return to office. There were allegations of Russian involvement, lots of good evidence that the media was being, in a certain sense, infiltrated by Russian messages that were designed to cast aspersions on the opposition, make Robert Fico look good. Yes, this is not politics as sort of practiced in maybe some other more long-standing democracies.
Is gun violence, is that a big issue in Slovakia? I mean,
I have to say, not that I know of. I don't have any statistics. No. But no, it's certainly not known as a particularly violent country as far as I'm aware. Though a lot of these, I should say, Central Europe, rural places do often have a lot of guns around simply because these are traditional farming places. I mean, they were agricultural countries until recently. I shall try and return with some statistics on gun violence in Slovakia.
Sure you will. Paul Moss, thank you very much indeed. Paul Moss is our Europe regional editor with some expertise there on the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, who has been taken to hospital after being shot. All we know so far is that there was a government meeting in the central town of Handlova. Several shots were fired from a crowd, 4 shots we are told, according to one report. One hit the Prime Minister in the abdomen, and he's been taken to hospital, and a man has been detained. So obviously we'll update you with all the details that come into us on that, and Paul will be back with more on that as well. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.